we did way back when you were at Voyager. Was it Stein?
Bob Stein.
Bob Stein,
He was
yeah.
the founder of
Must have
Voyager,
been 10 years ago that we did that program. Yeah,
almost.
That was good. Now the free speech is doing great stuff.
Free speech is doing really good stuff. Right. And also there's a lot of other important things that have happened in the media in the last few years, too. So.
Yeah, it's really moving. The whole digital thing is really, I think sometimes I look at it and I think it really has a democratizing effect that is encouraging. One looks for encouraging things. Welcome. Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program two gentlemen that are involved in, well, alternative, or as Lenny, one of our guests, says, parallel media possibilities in terms of the particularly electronic media pattern in the United States and the world. And I'd like to introduce them and get into a program and into the conversation. On my far left is Brian Drolet, and Brian's on a tight schedule. He's probably going to have to leave here before the end of the program, but he is with, or I'm not sure what your title is, but with Free Speech TV,
right,
if I'm not mistaken. That's having been with Voyager.
I worked at the Voyager Company here in New York, which was one of the early premier new media companies.
Indeed, yeah.
And now with Free Speech TV, which is, I think, the first and maybe the only real progressive television station in the world.
Yeah, and I congratulate you on what you've been able to do. And also, I would like to say, just parenthetically, but not so, is that through your good offices and so forth, we're being able to stream programming here out of MNN to the Internet, and for that, I would like to thank you.
Well, thanks a lot.
It's an incredible development. But we'll want to talk about that. But let me also introduce, if I could, on my immediate left is Lenny Charles. And Lenny Charles is with the INN Report, which I understand is working with Brian also in terms of getting some programming out, and is also aired on Manhattan Network here in New York. And Lenny, welcome very much to Conversations.
Thank you, Harold. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, we had sort of set this up in a way. There's so much to talk about. This now being October, it's Halloween of the year 2002, and there's much to be scared of if one looks out. But we had sort of set it up, and one of the things we want to do at the outset is your INN report. You have a little piece of tape that shows the context of it. Maybe you could set it up for us by telling us a little bit about the INN report as a piece of reporting, and then we'll set up this piece of tape, and then we'll come back and pick up the interview from there. But could you set up the piece for us?
Well, the INN report is made by our crew at RadioFreeAmerica.tv. It's done here in Manhattan. And we're creating what we'd like to call a parallel media. This is, INN Report actually represents a news bureau, a small internet-based and international-based news bureau that's gathering stories. And what we'd like to show right now is just the intro and just a little bit of one of the first stories to give people the flavor of how we're putting the show together.
Yeah, and you're beginning to get some distribution as well as here in Manhattan?
It's looking good.
Okay, well that's good. Well, let us in the studio then set there. It runs about a minute or so.
Runs about a minute and 17 seconds.
Just to give you a taste of the flavor of the program. Well, let's run that in the studio. If you could set that up and run that tape now, then please. And again, we're talking with Brian Drolet and Lenny Charles. Please run the tape now, then. Thank you.
Welcome to the INN Report. I am Mizan Kirby-Nunes. This week, we look at world opinion and fear in the Iraqi situation. The Green Alliance helps the German election outcome. A Tom Kiley interview with Daniel Friedenberg. Remembrance of one of our own. This week's Bushwhacked and more. Stay tuned. In a close election contest, Germany's Social Democrats, led by Johann Schroeder, maintained their majority coalition with Joschka Fischer's Green Party to continue their ruling position in the German parliament. A strong challenge by the right-wing coalition led by conservative Edmund Stoiber was decided in the end by Schroeder's open defiance of the Bush administration's insistence on war with Iraq, with preliminary reports showing both parties getting 38.5% of the vote.
That really looks good, Lenny. That really looks good, you know. And congratulations on putting it together. You have a really good place down on Walker Street here in Manhattan. We're going to let people know about that. But it looks good, and there's a lot of good programming beginning to develop, and some of the digital developments, Final Cut Pro and some of these things are putting good technology in the hands of the folks more and more all the time. So more and more good an alternative or parallel programming can begun to be made available to folks. And Brian, I guess tell me some about Free Speech TV. I know you have to leave before the end of the program. Maybe you could give a little history of that, how it has started and what you're doing, and then what your thoughts are in terms of positive possibilities that the alternative, or as Lenny calls it, the parallel media electronic has as we look ahead.
Well, I think Free Speech is doing some really exciting work right now, and we've begun to develop. We're a full-time channel on the Dish Network, so we broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to a national audience. And sort of our main show that we're doing every day live is Democracy Now!, which originates here in Manhattan, Amy Goodman's show.
Marvelous, yeah.
And so that's on every morning at 9 o'clock East Coast time, and then it's repeated twice during the day, once in the evening and once in the late evening, late night. And then we're also doing Lenny Charles' show, INN Reports, once a week on Friday, and that's a half-hour show.
It's an hour show.
It's an hour show, I'm sorry. It's an hour show.
You got a lot of stuff coming over the transom these days, yeah.
Well, now, actually, but you're talking about the technology. We've set up a TV1 loop at Democracy Now! Studios down at DCTV.
What does that mean, if I may, a TV1 loop?
It's essentially what it is. Lenny can explain this better
Yeah,
than
we
I
can talk maybe
It's a
later.
hotline to the Kremlin. It's like having a direct connection between the satellite uplink in Colorado and the television studio in Manhattan.
Where the
So,
program is coming from.
Right.
so we can have live television.
Right.
So you have a hot link to the
Well,
firehouse
they're
downtown?
able, yeah, the
Yeah, good.
firehouse is able to send a direct signal to our broadcast facility in
Great.
Colorado,
Great.
and from there it's sent directly up to the Dish uplink in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
So that's John Alpert and those people
Right,
that are down there,
right.
yeah.
And we're also engaged in another project with DCTV right now. We're developing, it's actually already built out, a thing called, we're calling it the Cyberbus, but it's a fully outfitted production studio and cameras, and it'll have a satellite uplink on it. And we'll be able to travel the country and do live programming around the country. And Alpert already did a test run with it. He did this youth voting initiative in the state of New York last few weeks.
I
And
see,
so
okay.
they've traveled around the state of New York with this bus. So we'll be doing our own programming with it starting in a few months. So there's
With
some
that
very-
bus,
with
huh?
that bus,
It'd
yeah.
be like Ken Kesey or something.
A little bit, yeah, except it's probably a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, a little
and
more
it's
expensive than
pretty,
that.
fully
Yeah.
outfitted as a production studio.
Yeah, good.
So I think the combination of this new programming that we've got from other producers, from Amy Goodman's show and from Lenny's show, really has created a whole new window of news news and analysis for the people of America. And I'll give you a story that I thought was quite affirmative. Last weekend we carried the demonstrations in Washington, D.C. against the war live on Free Speech TV. It was also carried on WorldLink. And that was, again, Lenny set that up with some folks here in New York who provided the satellite uplink truck and the satellite time.
Wow.
And so we were able to take that signal down at our broadcast facility and send it out live. And one of the young people that was working at this place, it's a small town in Colorado where the facilities are, this young guy, high school guy, said to me, I never used to read the news. I would never listen to the news on television. And sitting in here, I started to watch Democracy Now! In the morning. And sometimes I watch that show you have on Friday, which is the INN Reports.
Yeah.
And he said it's showed me a whole different view of the world.
Marvelous.
And I watch it every day now.
Yeah, marvelous.
So
yeah.
I think that's a small story, but a good indication
Yeah.
of the impact that's possible, because people in this country are starved for news. They're starved for the truth. They're starved for information. And I think that even though television is, the junk that's on the commercial stations is fairly addictive, I think people are looking for something else, and we've gotten a pretty positive response, even though we're small and not that many people have dishes.
I see. I wonder if you could maybe share with me a little bit. When you say you're taking it, so you have a transponder on a satellite that you uplink to a satellite. Now, if I may, just to frame the question a little. Now, differentiate for us, if you could, with your experience and knowledge, and both of you could talk to, but particularly you at this time. Going by satellite, and then it's coming down to people the people that get that satellite feed would have a, it used to be a 9-meter dish they needed to be at a head end somewhere or something, but it would be distributed with great quality and capability the way the networks do now.
Exactly.
Now, how do we differentiate that, and where does it fit in with the streaming on the internet, and what's the relationship between these two transponders, satellite delivered programming via, or in mimicking or parallel to the established news networks and so forth, and what the internet, and how do they interrelate?
Well, there's two major satellite systems in the United States, and they're really competitors with cable television.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Dish Network and there's DirecTV.
Yes,
DirecTV is owned by General Motors. Dish TV is, owned by some other folks.
There's some question about them merging?
They're attempting to merge,
Yeah,
but it's a question of whether they'll be able to. They didn't get FCC approval
Right,
for the.
that's what I understand. Yeah.
Dish was trying to buy out DirecTV, and they're competing with cable delivery of television around the country. And so there's about, I think there's about 10 million homes that receive DirecTV right now, and there's about 7 or 8 million homes that receive Dish TV.
I see.
And so it's an audience that's as big as Time Warner Cable around
Combined.
the country. There's about, maybe 18 million homes in America that receive satellite transmission for their television.
Do you happen to know the number for cable television?
It's probably at least twice that.
About twice,
Yeah.
but half of twice of
Yeah.
what the cable is a pretty big universe for
maybe-
direct
maybe
broadcast.
even- I mean,
And
it's
those-
growing. It's growing faster than cable is.
It is growing faster.
Yeah.
And the DirecTV feed comes right from the satellite to the home dish. You don't
That's
have to go
correct,
through
yeah.
an intervening agency and
No,
a relay or something.
It comes right to your home dish.
I
And you
see.
So on the Dish Network, you get all the channels that you would get on your cable station. You know, you can get HBO and Stars and the networks and all of that. Right?
Yes.
So, and the quality is generally as good or better as you get on cable television. Where they're really strong is in the rural areas where a lot of places don't get cable coverage.
Absolutely.
And where they're weakest is in a place like New York City, where it's really hard to aim a satellite, aim a dish so that you can hit the satellite. But these dishes are quite small; they're like 18 inches in diameter.
Yeah, they've gotten down. It used to be it had to be 3 meters or something, and
Right.
now they've gotten the technology advances.
Right.
Where does that fit in? We also walk around. Everyone has a cell phone now, part of a wireless world. And Mr. Gates tells us that the future of the internet is wireless with the tablet and so forth, and we have the Wi-Fi development and so forth. Could you address, because it seems it's coming direct from the satellite, in a sense it's wireless, where does it fit in with the universe of what is the cell phone, which is ubiquitous around the world now, and with the coming, or is it coming, Wi-Fi or wireless connection, high speed to the internet?
Well, the main thing to understand about it is that it's going to fry all of our brains and mutate all of our genes.
Well, that's a good piece of basic datum, right?
That's the main
Let's
thing,
get the
we're
basic.
constantly walking through, microwave and God knows what other kind of rays.
Yeah.
But I think the question is, the technology is really fascinating,
Yeah.
and it's the internet and the satellite and cable television have opened up an access for people that in the past were not able to reach large audiences with alternative views. Or parallel views. I actually like that, but they're not parallel. They're actually quite divergent views. Parallel media, divergent views, and so in America, where you get, I have always said for a long time that the market is a much more effective censor than the Soviet Ministry of Propaganda ever was.
Interesting.
So if you want to learn about the war that they're planning on Iraq, you can watch any of the networks. It doesn't matter how many we have, and you're going to get the same story and the same build-up for war and the same kind of jingoism, whether you're watching ABC, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, or whatever.
BBC.
Right? And so as long as you can have 1,000 channels. If it's the same voice coming across all those channels, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So what we've tried to do, and there's a growing alternative media movement in this country, which has become, I think, quite influential. If you count the independent media centers, which are now in 50 or 60 cities around the country and are represented on the web in a very powerful way. Organizations like Free Speech Television and also WorldLink, which is on the Dish Network as well. And then production operations like Democracy Now!, like INN Reports, and others that are beginning to develop. And also we've been able to develop a network of stringers around the world as well, you know, in the U.S. and around the world, so that we can actually bring the news in.
Now, where does that stringer footage come from, and how is one seeing that? How does it get to the home television screen?
Well, the way it's been working now with us is
do you have
that
a bureau in Colorado?
well, what we do is we create programming templates, really. So, for example, we started with a program called World in Crisis right after September 11th, and we did news. Initially, we did news every day, and then for 5 minutes on the hour, and then we developed it into a half-hour news program, and then we morphed it into this thing we're calling now Mobile Eyes, where we'll do 48 hours of solid coverage on a topic once a month, and then show that programming during the course of the rest of the month in smaller blocks, right? But we have people, mainly people who came to media, although came to alternative media, although many of them had been working in media for a long time, through the development of the independent media centers that exploded after the Seattle demonstrations in 1999. And so, you know, there's been a whole sort of school and training facilities developed with these independent media centers that have brought forward new people and people that are skill producers to create new programming. And so what we do is we encourage people to, or sometimes we you know, we'll hire people to actually go out and cover specific events. And then we package that together into a program and broadcast it on Free Speech
on
television.
a regular basis?
On a regular basis,
You do, yeah. And do you, and what is that called? Something Eyes or something?
We're calling it Mobile Eyes.
Mobile Eyes, and that's available to the people who are...
Anybody that has a Dish Network and can watch Free Speech TV.
Now, and you're also now connected, and we also have, we didn't mention, but we also have this phenomena out of history of the public access cable television centers around the country, and you had some connection with that, and they tend to be part of an alternate or media or a parallel medium to the industry-oriented, profit-oriented networks and so forth.
Yeah,
so
they're really an important, they're an extremely important resource for people in this country. I think underutilized, but free speech actually started out. Free speech started as a channel on cable. It was least access time, and it was called the 90s channel. And we were eventually priced off cable by John Malone's boys that owned that particular system. And so for a couple of years what we did was we distributed programming to public access stations around the country. We would send out about 4 hours a week of programming to public access stations.
You did that by satellite or by
No, we
bicycle?
would send that by bicycle. We'd send
tapes,
those tapes out, right? Once we got the Dish Network, what we've begun to do is we've begun to install the satellite dishes at public access stations so that they can downlink our programming. And
how many of those have you been able to put in place?
Well, between Free Speech and the efforts of Democracy Now!'s staff, we've been able to put dishes in about 60 or 70 public access stations around the country.
And by your reckoning, how many of those public access facilities are there around the United States?
You know, I think there's actually almost 1,500.
That's what I hear, 1,500. Some of them are pretty small. And
some of them are quite small. Yeah.
And those are one-way propositions. Do you have any thought to have feedback as you do with the John Alpert's
well, what we're
downtown?
trying, you know, a lot of the public access stations aren't set up to do that.
Yes,
but I think in the future, you know, like Manhattan Neighborhood Network has this fabulous new facility here, production facility. I certainly can see programming developing out of public access stations that's also shown on Free Speech TV.
So you get some distribution of parallel programming and so forth. And it is exciting. Are you generally optimistic by the trends democratizing, if that's the right word, that the digital revolution we now have? We used to have Avid, now we've got Final Cut Pro, and the cost is one fraction of what it used to be. Digital cameras are much less expensive than Betacam, SP. Everything is coming down in a certain sense. And the media, do you see the media or the access to sophisticated electronic media getting more and more, closer and closer to the hands of the folks?
Sure, that's what's,
and that's encouraging.
That's what's happening.
That's a large-scale encouraging development.
It's really encouraging, and there's another development which brings us even closer to what the commercial television is doing, because they're cheapening their costs of production. They'll send out a camera crew, which equals one person carrying a camera on their shoulder, using a beta camera, mini DV, to go out and shoot a program, and that person comes back in, does the interview or does the coverage, comes back in and edits it well. So they're actually cheapening their production costs by sort of using the same equipment that we now have access to.
That's it. We have the
equipment.
equipment.
So there's actually, we have the potential, to provide a similar. I wouldn't say as the standard quality, television quality, because they can put a lot of more money into production.
And there is always going to be DreamWorks.
And there's always DreamWorks and all that.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing, and this is really, I think, key to understanding alternative television, is that we have access to these tools and we have access to these venues, but they own the venues.
Now
they own the television stations, they own the cable stations, they own the internet pipelines, they own they own everything that we deliver our programming on.
Now, who's the
right?
they?
The they is the same people that own commercial television.
Well, that's the same
AT&T
people.
and et cetera.
But it tends to be the same relatively small group of, I don't want to use an overworked term, but plutocrats who have ownership of technology in general as opposed to most of the citizenry,
but
which is a problem that might well be addressed sociologically or economically or politically.
But that's what's key. For me, the defining character of the alternative media that's developed very broadly throughout the country now is that it's not just providing people with information, but providing people with information they can act on. And that our shows, our programming are intended to develop activists. At Free Speech we say, that we're attempting to use the power of television, to work with artists and activists to create an informed and active citizenry. And I think, if you look at the programming that Lenny's doing in INN Reports, for example, all of it's geared to inform people so that they become active and get engaged. And the only way that we're going to maintain this alternative media system that we have is if we're in the streets fighting for it. No powerful state ever lets its opposition just have a free microphone.
Louis the 16th didn't want to.
No, so
the Ancien regime, or how do you say it in French? Are you French? Yeah.
No,
you don't know
ancient
regime?
The old,
ancient
the old
regime.
Guard, right.
Sometimes I wonder if we don't have an ancient regime here, and that there's some sort of forces that will be as much a surprise to them as it was to possibly Louis the 16th, maybe in a more benign kind of way that it could be brought about, but a major paradigm or a major transformation, which is something different perhaps than the loyal opposition within the notion of alternative, but the idea of parallel, that there's a big change going on, that isn't incorporated within the historically inherited institutional assumptions writ large. If you understand what I'm saying? It's a time of qualitative transformation, the evolution of events.
Could, and heads may roll again.
Well, let's hope not, because the really comprehensively read thing, Fuller or something like that, would be that you could bring some alternative that could finally be, through good understanding, able to be understood by those responsible for the historically inherited institutions and gone along with by them. That would be the ultimate thing, where we could come to an understanding that, hey, we've got a new ontologic reality or something, and we can all move in a new direction. That would be much preferred than some sort of a violent confrontation.
Well, what's happening now is that you could argue that the new is being born within the old. In other words, people are really, attempting to do a different kind of media, for example, that's much more democratic, that's open to many more voices, and that objectively is quite different than what you'll see in the commercial media. We can't free ourselves entirely from history yet, but I do think that the new is being born from within the old.
My favorite line, Brian, is Daedalus. I say it all the time to people who watch conversations. They're sick of hearing it, but James Joyce had Daedalus say, "History is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken." And we may be coming into some sort of a closing quotes on when we first put up the first stone tool a couple 100,000 years ago, or something on that order. Something qualitative is going on, blowing in the wind, as Bobby Dylan used to say.
Well, I think we can be fairly optimistic in many ways. I mean,
if you think about
if you look at, here you have these, you could call them maniacs, you could call them, greed-driven oil men, whatever you want to call the people that are running this country right now. You know, and they have an agenda for an American empire,
They
you know,
sure
to
do.
expand imperial rule. You know, nobody's going to stand in the way, and they say that quite openly. We'll knock down whoever tries to get in our way,
Yeah.
right? Well, you had probably 500,000 people around the country on the weekend of October 26th
Amen.
standing up against it.
Mhm.
You know, you've had probably 50,000 people sign a statement saying, you're not going to do this in our name. We oppose what you're doing.
Mhm.
You know, those ads have appeared in the New York Times and the LA Times and the Chronicle and USA Today. So there's a visible growing resistance to this in the
Yeah.
country. And, you know, in some ways you could say it had its initial explosion in Seattle in the demonstrations against the World Trade Organization. But there's an awareness of what these people are trying to do is not good for children and other living things.
Maybe
and there
what
is
they'll-
a resistance growing up against it.
Yeah, and what they're trying to do, and also the paradigm within which they operate. I mean, they're market fundamentalists. They got a sense of fundamental. We have Islamic fundamentalists. We have market fundamentalists. We have these people that have a certain sense within the old paradigm that they have such certainty, and that's a very dangerous context, particularly within a synergistic universe, as Mr. Fuller used to tell us. And also, they just reported in the New York Times that it seems to be that we have many universes out there. They're parallel universes for Mr. Bush and company to, you know, put their claim upon or something. But it's a dangerous time because we have such power. We can destroy the species now, and we have such incredible liberating, overcoming scarcity in many sense, technological capability, if we would find a way to do it.
Well, I think what we should do is let them have those other parallel universes, and we'll take this one
We'll
for
find
now.
a parallel
We'll do our
universe.
parallel media
Yeah,
in
we'll
this
do
universe
parallel
and let them
media.
do their media in the
Yeah,
parallel universe.
but anyway, I just wanted to congratulate you enormously. And it's been 10 years or so since we saw you years ago when you were at Voyager and so forth. And my best, Mr. Stein.
Thank you.
You know, and so forth. And I'm glad that, thank you very much for what you're doing. Congratulations on all that. And we certainly here at MNN thank you for the work you've been helping us to lay us on with you to stream our programming
Yeah, you
out.
can watch-
It's a tremendous breakthrough
Yeah,
for
you
us.
can watch Manhattan Neighborhood Network on the internet every day. I think there's 4 channels
Yep.
of Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and it's that streaming is hosted by Free Speech TV. And
Yeah.
we're very happy to do it. For
Well,
you.
it's really grand. Do you think there's going to be more of that kind of thing going on from
Oh, yeah.
public access realms
Yeah.
around the world?
Well, I think what's happening is that there's a lot more collaborative effort
Mhm.
happening. I mean, you know, Lenny has brought, for example, you know, INN have brought tremendous new energy and programming into free speech television.
Yeah.
And we're able to provide outlets for programming that prior would not have seen the light of day.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a, you know, whether you want to call it a synergy or whatever, I think there's a growing collaboration that's happening. You know, the Democracy Now! Show that we air live on Free Speech TV
It's great.
has a
She's great,
tremendous
yeah.
impact around
Yeah.
the country, and so I'm pretty optimistic. Now, how long we'll be able to keep these venues open, keep these, you know, pipelines of information flowing into the American public, we'll see. But we have to fight for it, and I think, you know, that's one thing about public access television. I don't think people realize what an important asset it is to the people of this country.
Yeah.
And really have to fight for it. People
I th-
really have to protect public access and community television.
I quite agree with you. People that aren't involved in it, but just public-spirited citizens, the idea that you have such a thing as an electronic Hyde Park corner that somehow has been able to develop in this country where people can have their say is an incredibly rich legacy of
Yeah.
our democratic tradition, and it should be supported
Yeah.
intellectually, morally, and otherwise by the general citizenry that are concerned about, you know, freedom of speech and freedom of expression, because it's a valuable contribution. There's so much we could talk about, you know, and it's so good to see you again.
Well,
It's been
thanks a
so
lot.
long and everything. I welcome you to Manhattan Network. I'm really glad you could come by and see our facilities.
Oh,
Maybe
it's
you could
great.
say hello to a couple of people.
Yeah,
I know
well,
you're running on a really
Yeah, but I'll
fast
stop by,
schedule,
yeah.
right? So I could go on talking to you for about 16 hours.
Okay, we can talk to Lenny for
Yeah, I
16
can talk to
hours.
Lenny. So we're just let the audience know that Brian has an incredibly packed schedule. He has to go, so he's going to leave now. That's why we've been talking monologue-ish. I'm sorry we're talking right past you, Lenny, but we wanted to give him a chance to you know, get some of this in. We just scratched the surface. Maybe we'll
Okay.
get together and have a beer.
And tell
one
folks
night.
to be sure and watch Free Speech TV. It's on the Dish Network channel 9415.
Okay, you watch Free Speech. What do I say?
Free Speech
Free
TV.
Speech TV. TV. It's on the Dish Network 9415.
Channel 9415,
on
and you
direct
can
to-
see the on the Dish Network.
On
and
the
you
Dish
can
Network.
and you can come to our website at freespeech.org.
Go to the yeah, that's right, and
And a lot of the stuff we run on television is
Yeah.
available on the website. We have over 1,000 videos available
Great.
for.
Well,
for
I'll tell you, bro,
viewing
if
on the
I
website.
may, I went to my friend. He did it mini DV. He put it up on the thing, streamed it on here from out of MN in here,
Yeah.
and I went to I got Roadrunners,
Yeah.
broadband. I went there, and honest to God, I filled my screen on the computer.
Yeah.
Looks like it looked like an MGM movie,
Yeah.
and it's everywhere
It's getting better.
in the world.
Yeah.
It's some sort of a synergistic
it's
surprise
happening.
miracle
It's
that's
happening.
happening right
Right.
before our very eyes. Listen,
Okay, thanks a lot.
so good. We can talk. Let's
Okay.
get together and have a beer one
Okay.
night if we can when you're in New York. Your pleasure then to have had those perceptions. We're just going to continue running. That's Brian Drolet. He has to leave and catch up with the schedule. So we're going to continue talking with Lenny Charles. So good to see you, Brian. Thanks very much for coming in.
thanks a lot.
You better go out this way, I would suggest. So just duck down under the camera. Can you do it? Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. We'll catch up with you later. Or maybe you could set this camera, yeah. She'll set this camera. And so, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to, we were talking with him, but, so congratulations on what you're doing. Let's pick up the INN thing then. That was a really nice piece you had there.
Well, thank you.
Why don't you share a little of your own background? I mean, of the INN, when it got developed, where you are. You're here in New York down on Walker Street, and you're doing a lot of good stuff, and you're distributing it on that network now. Share, when did you all get together? Who's involved, and what are some of the challenges and road as you begin to look ahead, as you think for the INN report?
Well, the INN report essentially sprung out of Indie Media New York video team, and several members of the New York independent media video team are still working in the INN report.
Yeah, we're just getting ready to put the camera on you, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, go ahead.
Well, that's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we did we did a program with you, Lenny, back about, must have been, what, 5-6 months ago or something like that. And I know you're down on Walker Street, 56 Walker Street. You have a theater and a production facility there. And you got some really good people, and you're putting together some really good programming.
Well, we're doing several different kinds of programming at Walker Stage, but
Yeah.
mostly I'd like to talk about the INN report.
Okay,
INN
please do.
report was born about a year ago.
Yeah.
It was based on the idea that with the modern technology, the way that the price of technology has come down, and the combinations and usages, alternative usages of this technology, we could create a real-time news bureau, a system for delivering different news, or the news that we felt was important to an audience on a daily or a weekly basis.
Yeah,
Well, we
yeah.
were shooting for a daily for a while. We settled on a weekly World News Week in Review.
Yeah.
People ask what INN stands for, and I don't have any.
International News Report? No.
No.
International News Network?
International would be selling it short.
Mm.
Independent would be selling it short. Intergalactic might be more. No. International would be selling it short. Independent would be selling it short. Internet would be selling it short. Put them all together, and I think that's what INN is, because we can go out on the Internet to all the world news sources and see the news that the rest of the world is getting. You know, right now our country and its citizens, many of whom are really scratching their heads these days,
Yeah.
are wondering how it is the rest of the world feels this way against our great empire. Well, if they saw the news the rest of the world was getting, which is what we're able to bring them in English, presented in a traditional news format, which is what we do, they might get a different opinion of what's happening.
You get this programming from around the world off the internet or off a satellite feed, or how do you get this? And is it programming that's available to anybody if they know the right site to go to these days?
Well, it's not the programming, it's the compilation. The News Bureau essentially will go out to all these internet sites.
Yeah.
These are the major newspapers in print, the online versions of the in-print newspapers from around the world, and see what news these people are getting. And we'll pick really fascinating, interesting stories that you're certainly not going to get around here. If it is a story that domestic news is covering, then we're going to give you a different point of view. And it's not just the good guy, bad guy point of view. It's just we try to do it the other side, and we try to get a collection of 2 or 3 sources that are going to reinforce the same idea. Now, I'm not going to get into any particular stories. You have to see the show for that. But we follow very closely the elections and a lot of the uprisings in South America. We follow a lot of the human rights stories in Africa. Of course, we're following the Mideast and Southeast Asia very carefully throughout these conflicts. And we're looking at We call the show Worldview, INN Report Worldview, because that's what it is, the worldview. The model is, how can we, the citizens of this country, feel that we're part of a world community if we're getting news that doesn't reflect or it doesn't even take into account how the rest of the world feels and what news that they're getting. So we base the report on that, and along with those news stories, and there are about 200-word stories approximately each one, and they use either a slideshow to support them of the individuals we're talking about, and occasionally we'll use internet footage, now that you were mentioning how well internet footage can be aired.
Amazing,
We use internet footage and over-the-shoulder shot, sometimes full screen. We also, as Brian was mentioning, we have a way of getting footage sent to us by stringers.
Good.
They can FTP us footage. They can capture it with their camcorders. They can enter it in their computers. They can make it into a digital file and send it to our server where we can add that into the show as special reports. Right now, using that method, Democracy Now! Is receiving live from Iraq every day.
Yeah, they really. Yeah,
it's a few hours. It's a few hours behind, and the Iraqi internet system must be AOL because you can't get very big files through. But they're able to do a live video report from Iraq every day, and it's amazing how they're doing it. And this FTP system is something we've all...
What's FTP?
File transfer protocol.
Okay.
It's just an internet. It's like an attachment for your email, and these are very large files, and they represent a very viewable
footage.
Very viewable footage coming in completely digitally over the internet. So it's a good example of what Brian was saying, how a one-person camera crew / editor / computer operator can do a report anywhere in the world, and we can get it on these shows either in real time or only 7 hours afterwards.
That can make people from the parallel media universe be able to be very competitive with what the networks are able to manage these days. It seems, as he said, they're those bureaus are shrinking. Those networks are shrinking their costs because they have budgets that are staggering. They got to pay billions of dollars to their stars and things.
What's happened with that is, I have a friend that worked for CBS News, and he told me last year that in the several years before that, their budgets had gone straight down, and they were looking to CNN as their major source for news. So when you're looking at even CBS, you're getting a lot of CNN stuff. When you look at the nightly news, those people are much more interested in the lottery and the baseball scores than they are the 10-word blurb, how King George has managed to arm twist another world leader.
King George, you're referring to our president, George W. Bush?
Not my president.
When you say that, you don't feel that he
is
your president.
Presidents are elected in my country, and I come from America, and I think a lot of Americans feel that way. Not disrespectful to the ruling class, but I like counting the votes, which brings up the whole topic of creating parallel.
I happen to see that you've had Greg Palast, right?
We've had Greg Palast
as a speaker at the theater. There.
At the theater, at the main stage, and he came out with that wonderful book.
Yep. What's the title of it again? Best Democracy
Money Can Buy. And he's also involved. I'd like to put in a kudo to Danny Schechter in the movie that he came out. Greg Palast was very, and this leads into a bigger topic I'd like to get into. Greg Palast is very influential and a very big part in Danny Schechter's film made with ITVN and Foundation money called Counting on Democracy.
Yep. It's being aired on PBS now, on some affiliates in the PBS.
Some affiliates. However, this was another big disappointment because Fred Silverman's film Votes Count was made almost as a comedy, and it felt like it was made with GOP money because it didn't explore any of the results. It even misled several facts, and when I saw that and I realized that PBS had elicited that from Fred Silverman, and the attitude that Fred had that this is a time for healing, not a time for truth, was essentially what he told me on the phone the other day, and he didn't use the word truth, but the emphasis of his film was a time for healing, therefore let's not worry about things like facts. And this is the show that PBS wanted to air on what happened in Florida. I looked at this and I almost threw a brick at the television.
Don't do that, it's your television.
Yeah, I know, I'd have to buy another one. I have too many already.
Yeah.
And after seeing Danny Schechter's film, which was a serious investigative work, and Danny's a major player in the documentary world.
Yeah, he is. Danny's
wonderful.
Great. Yeah, mediachannel.org, right?
Mediachannel.org.
Yeah, you want to go to Danny's thing. He's a great writer, great,
And to see how PBS, which we look to as almost the loyal opposition, to look at how they passed over Danny's work and aired something which almost looked like it was the GOP party line and what had happened with the election. I saw this and I was very disappointed to see how far to the right things have gone, even in public access. I mean, even in community television, I guess I'd have to call PBS, not public access, which is a different category. We're seeing a lot of this. Media is going to the right. There's
It's going to the money, and the
It's
money is
going to
very
the money.
concentrated. It's highly concentrated, the money. And the people that have to, in order to function within that, election reform or whatever it is, they have to appeal to the people that have the money because it's all a matter. The first order of business is the budget in order to get a massive thing going, and so they have to appeal to the money. And so it's going that way because the money is very concentrated.
I had a conversation on the way over here with Sarah Ferguson, who writes for the Village Voice,
Yes,
and Mother
she
Jones.
was hoping to see her, yeah.
She called me on the cell phone, and I let her go off for a little bit so she could fill my mind up with a lot of good names and ideas. Her ideas were great. She comes mostly out of print, and we've been able to use a lot of her print stories to help out with the show. She's one of our staff of writers that we use.
Yeah.
She was saying Helen Thomas, the journalist, the White House forever correspondent, wrote a scalding piece the other day.
Did she? Yeah, right.
On the administration, dictatorial, the usual stuff that everybody's been saying. Of course you can see Krugman. You even have Sapphire coming out. But what she made me aware of was that the old school journalists are really raising their eyebrows at everything this administration is doing, and they're the people that usually stay in line. However, what's happening is they've hired on a new breed of editors who's younger and wants to keep their jobs. So they're editing and they're cutting and they're, I don't want to use the word censor, but we're seeing so much of this in print. In the major publications, we're hearing from the journalists that wrote the stories that they're being, I don't want to use the word censor, but they're being cut back pretty far. And these are established people that we've grown up on. We've seen Friedman and all these people for years writing these incredible pieces, and now they're being cut back. They're being let go. The story with Arnett in the first Gulf War, he didn't give the company line, and there went the job.
You mean in Baghdad?
Yeah.
In Baghdad, yeah.
We're seeing more of this. Well,
again, it's the money talks, right?
The money talks.
Money talks increasingly, and the money is in fewer and fewer hands. We just gave $1.6 trillion tax cut to the upper 1/2 of 1%. And
I'm sure they deserve it.
Do you see the differentiation between CEOs and line workers and that sort of thing? It's absurdly out of skew now, and that's a direction in which it's all going. So one would expect we do not have an economic democracy where everybody is in a certain sense empowered by the rules of the game and the system itself. We have we have somewhat of a democracy. We have a representative democracy. We have these elections, the best government money can buy, in the words of Mr. Palace. Perhaps they see it that way because it's all influenced by the money race, soft money, and so forth. But economically, we have a plutocracy. This is a plutocracy with just a few people who really own the wealth that everybody else is beholden to in a very almost slavish way, if those people want to put the screws on.
Harold, the plutocracy likes itself. It doesn't wake up in the morning and have self-doubt. I've been looking at a lot of upcoming election stuff, you know, predicting polls. I even saw Chris Matthews the other night, who was somehow turned a little to the left in the past. I like to watch his show occasionally, and of course Donahue. But in the upcoming elections, they're saying who gets out the vote. Well, right now, it seems to be evident there are fewer loyal GOP voters, but every last one of them is going to show up at the polls. There are certainly more Democratic supporters, but they're going to kind of forget to vote that day. And depending if the Democrats get the vote out, we're going to see a gain. If they just happen to forget to get the vote out that day, then the Republicans are going to get a gain. And the thing is, the plutocracy loves itself. It knows what it takes to win. It knows how to win. The loyal opposition, the left, the Democrats know what it takes to lose. They're comfortable being the remorseful losers.
Well, you got
they need to learn to win.
Yeah, you've got that, and in particularly the wing of that, which is called neoconservatives, which are in the saddle now, and you got market fundamentalists, Milton Friedman followers, and
free
this sort
market
of thing.
guys.
They've got a laissez-faire, and they got that, and they see that pattern for the world. They've got the bit in their mouth with a sense of truth, which is as dangerous, it seems to me, in a certain sense, as some fundamentalist Islamic notion or some sort of religious fundamentalist thing, and they are in control of our government now and the system, and they have a vision and they have a purpose within the context by which the affairs of the planet are run. And since they have a vision, but it seems to me the alternative, the Democrats, if that's going to be the loyal opposition, the Democrats are practically supine. They gave him that huge tax cut. They voted the power for him to get the power to go to Iraq. They just issue after issue, and they do not have an alternative. That's why you like the idea of parallel media or parallel understanding as opposed to alternative, and it is different. And it might be that what the times call for is something like, and I also, if I may, I don't want to get going. You say George, President George or King George? Is George? You had Prescott. Okay. You had Prescott Bush. You had the President number 41. You got it says George III.
So we had George III. Was the president at least.
Yeah. So we had.
He was elected.
It was George III against whom we revolted in 1776, and we had Louis XVI was there in France, and there was a big movement because the time of dynastic rule of as an established system had been for hundreds of years was over, and there was a new order coming, republic, representative democracy, and it might well be that there's a new order that is called for now that would have to subsume those loyal oppositions in a new understanding, a new liberating understanding, and that there is a really large-scale transformation in order that doesn't even fit within the traditional paradigm of those who are within the court of a new, what would be called like a new modern ancient regime tethered to ideas which have historically been outpaced by our technology and development.
Good can of worms, Harold. Mm-hmm. Good can of worms.
And it would be the media where these things could be discussed, because in a certain sense the media is meta to the power relationships and the responsibilities that go with that.
Let's say the people that own the media own everything, and let's say it as if it's a fact. I mean, if you're a good investor, you've got a good portfolio, you're a good stockbroker, you're of course going to follow things that are going to work. Right now, we're sitting here in front of maybe $10,000 cameras. If we were to go a few blocks away over to NBC or CBS, we'd be in front of $50,000 cameras. Okay, part of the game here is to make the parallel media look as good as we can. This is why I call it parallel media, not activist media or alternative media. Alternative media always went for an alternative look. You know,
hippies.
Well, I don't know about that. It's just an alternative look. They look that way, therefore the look is bad, what they're saying is bad, we're going to give you the truth, we're going to do it our way. I don't know that that's necessary. These people have invested so much money into creating legitimacy. I think that's a great thing. So I think with our technology, the use of that, the clever use of that technology, we can present a look and an image that is maybe not comparable, but a close enough second to where when people turn on the shows, the parallel shows, let's just call them, they're going to feel comfortable thinking that they're in a professional environment, and it's going to give them a sense of security that the stories we're telling are the truth. The stories are the truth, but if we don't present them in a good way, then they're not going to be believable. We want to make this news believable, and sometimes the news, this is news. It's all news. If you were to look on the back pages of any major newspaper in the country, you might find some of the stories we run. But we're going to say that these are the important stories. We're going to say that sonar by the U.S. Navy is basically killing the fish and the whales in the oceans, and we're going to go ahead and cite scientific studies to back it up. They're not going to run that story, and they're certainly not going to run it on television. So we're going to say that this is important because it represents a trend that the military and the government is doing. They're ignoring environmental treaties. They're just going.
Yeah, it's across the board, and it is across the board.
One more thing.
Yeah, sure, by all means.
On that, I have a guy that I went to high school with, and he's a career Washingtonian. He worked for the EPA, and he tells me the story of how when the current administration took over, they told everybody to take all those cases, put them on the shelf, and take a long lunch. So on issues like the environment, on issues like GMO foods, on issues like the conference we had, the WSSD in South Africa, this administration is grim. It is not good for humanity, not good for living things, as
They've
Brian
backed off
said.
on the commitment to AIDS. They had $200 million and they backed off
Well,
from
they
that.
cut it back.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's of a pattern. It's of a piece.
it's of a pattern. Well, that's on those topics. Now, if we get into war and going it alone and acting like an empire on that topic, we can have a field day. We could do a show every 20 minutes forever, and we can get experts from all over the world come on and speak about how this is just plain wrong. We don't have to go after personalities. We don't have to go after the Prince of Darkness and his Cub Scout troop or anything like that. But it's easy to make that case. It's easy for people from around the world to make that case. The American people are being told one unified message. The administration is right. You elected them, which we have a problem with that, and that it is our job to support this president. It is our job to stand unified to the world with this message. The whole rest of the world is ready to either take a cyanide pill or take a spaceship somewhere else. Nobody's sure how to deal with this.
Well, Mr. Bush is still very, very popular. He's up in the 80 percentile if you take it across the board. Very popular. People are very, very fearful. They've got this terrorist thing going. We just had he's very popular among the population. If they say, do you like the job Mr. Bush is doing? He's got high approval ratings across
They're in the
the
60s,
society.
not the 80s.
Well, they were in the 80s. They could go up again when the war happens, when people will rally around the flag, remember? And
I don't see a war happening. If
You don't
if for some reason my car doesn't explode on the way home or something like that, we can be influential in stopping this war.
Well, perhaps so. That would be a lot of people that are wanting to do that sort of thing. But meanwhile, the events go on, and it's to where there's going to be a larger scale change that they're at one wing of a paradigm and a system of organization. I would say at its base it would be some sort of laissez-faire Milton Friedmanism coming off Schumpeter with creative entrepreneurialism or Van Hayek, or they've got this kind of economic theory and political theory that underpins what they're doing. But I mean,
right.
they feel that they are right in a way, in a dialectic with, let's say, Marx or something like that, and that sort of thing. But the thing is, there's going to have to be some sort of a parallel alternative that is going to be able not only to just come in a dialectic with that in terms of being, we're some socialists or something like that. It's going to be a thing that will subsume those theories that have underpinned political philosophy and so forth like that in a way. And what you're going to have is an opening upon, it would seem to me, some of the poets and some of the artistic and creative people. And it seems to me, if I may, this technology where you're getting Final Cut Pro, you're getting editing capability in the hands of the folks to where you're going to get somebody on his desktop who is creative. You're going to have a nation of little budding Spielbergs that are going to be able to put out major works of art and just
Spielberg, Harold, doesn't do the news. Spielberg does art.
Well, I was saying
Spielberg does stories long after the fact. One of the most important things that free speech is doing now, and I have to touch just a little bit on what happened last weekend. Do we have enough time for that?
We only got about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear the distinction, but still I'm pleased by the artists
free
getting
speech
involved.
and the other station, WorldLink, are just now touching on current events and news. It's a changeover from running. It's important that of some horrific event that happened that's portrayed in a documentary 2 years later, but it's very important of what's current today to keep people on board with what's happening in the world today. A little bit about last weekend, and then I guess we're going to be out of time. Last weekend was the first media collaboration between Free Speech TV, WorldLink TV, Peace TV. INN Report helped bring it together, and it was aired live in Cairo. So what's happening here is, if you look at CNN Saturday afternoon, you'll see George Bush and Vicente Fox standing out by the ocean, patting each other on the back. If you turn 3 channels down, you'll see 200,000 plus people, undeniable the numbers, 150,000 by the lowest estimates out there. It was underreported. We were given reports of several hundred to several thousand people. It just wasn't reported. So where's the truth? CNN wouldn't even acknowledge it existed. They gave a very brief blurbs on it. Several thousand people, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, 150,000 plus, possibly over 200,000 people. Most America never knew it existed.
Yeah, I know.
They thought thousands of people. They didn't realize it was the biggest organized protest since the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And the last thing about that protest was, like the media groups, the alternative or parallel media groups got together, there were other groups like International Answer, who's usually pretty far to the left for most
Brian
people.
Becker and those guys,
They
yeah.
dropped their party line, and everybody dropped their party line, and they were willing to get together for one thing: to stop the war and to fight this administration to keep our country. It was just as much about fighting the administration as it was about stopping the war in Iraq, and the speeches reflected that.
Yeah, well, it's all of a piece. You know, a certain thing, information all over, we got so much going on, it's all of a piece, and you can get patterns to that. And if you begin to get those patterns, it seems to me often it's the visionaries, it's the people that are not in positions of immediate power and so forth, who have the vision with the alternative that would be, ultimately you'd want to have a system that is so comprehensively appropriate as to be inclusive of those who are responsible for the historical systems, as well as being dialectically in opposition to them in establishing something new that's going to come from the poets, and that they can be expressing that in a way that would be hopefully a system by which things could be transformed in a qualitatively liberating new way. That's the promise of the times. And it seems to me the alternative media, INN and Free Speech TV is
Democracy
really helping.
Now, of
Democracy
course.
Now, Manhattan Network
are
all helping in that. And
Harold, this movement,
this is an incredibly important time in the evolution of universal
this movement
consciousness.
may actually represent the majority of Americans as they're given the information and they see what's going on, that they usually join. They usually at least keep an open ear and realize that there are two sides to the story, and then they become interested in keeping their ears open.
All right, that's good. I think the alternative that is the parallel reality that's going to come is one that won't invalidate Milton Friedman. It will subsume Milton Friedman and Schumpeter and the rationale for that within a larger understanding, and that's the promise, so that they can also be won over, in my view. But I'm sorry, we've run out of time. It's been your pleasure to have the perceptions of Lenny Charles,
Along with
entrepreneur,
Brian Drolet.
and don't forget Brian Drolet, who contributed mightily. Happy to
And see the INN report
see
every
the
Thursday
INN
at
report
5.
and Free Speech TV and Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and watch
Thursdays
your
at 5.
alternative unity. We're running out of time, so that's it for now. Pleasure to have been able to bring you those perceptions. We're in conversations. Invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again next week. That's it for now. Thanks a lot for coming in, Lenny, and also for getting in touch with Brian and helping him get here. I appreciate it very much. It's good for us to catch up with some of these major developments in media. That's it for now. We'll see you next week, and thanks for viewing. We'll be coming back next week. So you can only just touch the surface of all these things.
We got into a couple of things. We
yeah,
didn't do too bad.
just stay put, because they're still they're still recording.
Mm-hmm.
And
We're looking towards the axis of good in South America. You've got
you got Brazil, yeah.
you got Lula, you've got
Lula.
Chavez, and now you have something in Ecuador coming up that we're doing a story on that this week.
Argentina's terrible. A friend of mine who was down there, he said it was like it was
It's a
just
mess.
horror.
They're going to have to get a. I think
So
that
the IMF and the basic thing, you got Stiglitz and you got Sachs and
Stiglitz
these
jumped
people.
bail now.
Yeah,
Stiglitz
well,
is on our side now.
Well, he has been for a long time, and there's some people like that. But then it's gonna come around finally. It's going to come around to basic economic theory, and they don't have a basis in theoretical basis for the operating of this spaceship Earth, and that's where the ultimate hope of gaining a system that is not only dialectically opposition to what's in place, but one that is so appropriate that it can include those people responsible for those systems in an educational consciousness-raising process, and they'll go along with it. That's my hopeful vision, so that you don't have to have a confrontation.
Well, Harold, as we look for that, the guys on the other side of the fence who happen to own everything are creating more and more rules, and they're creating more and more control.
Yeah.